Hear ye, all rise. The Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is now in session. The Honorable Judge Christian Day residing.
Please be seated. I understand that we are here in the case of St. Joseph's Hospital as a defendant in a medical case involving Ms. Pneumonia, who is bringing an action against the hospital claiming that she contracted pneumonia as a result of improper care and treatment during her stay. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel ready to proceed?
We're ready, Your Honor.
Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense moves to have stipulations entered into evidence so that we may avoid the long and involved responsibility of entering these documents into evidence.
And what's the stipulation?
Your Honor, first we stipulate as authentic and complete the following documents: a 6-page physician's order form, that being the physician order forms of Dr. Janet Cheeseborough, a 12-page document constituting the patient's progress report for the plaintiff, Mrs. Millie Monia, from August 2nd, 1983 to August 10th, 1983. In addition, there is a 1-page document being the discharge instructions for the same plaintiff, a 1-page document being the surgical preparation sheet for the plaintiff, and a 2-page document, the patient teaching program sheets. In addition, Your Honor, we stipulate that all of the witness statements that are being used by this morning's witnesses have been previously signed by these witnesses. A second stipulation, Your Honor, is that the hospital staff, the witnesses that will be presented to the court this morning, are sufficiently familiar with and competent to testify to the standard hospital procedures. Third and finally, Your Honor, we stipulate that Dr. Janet Cheeseborough is a medical expert and hereby sufficiently qualified to testify to patient symptomology, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. Your Honor, in addition, we stipulate that the Respirex, which will be used in this morning's trial, has been stipulated as previously entered into evidence and is an authentic device.
Any objections?
No.
Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have an opening statement?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Michael Tawil, and along with my co-counsel Mark Blum, I represent the plaintiff in this action, Millie Monia. As plaintiffs, we have the burden of proof today, and that means that we have to prove to you that the defendant in this case is liable for causing Millie Monia's injuries. Millie Monia is suing St. Joseph's because after she had her gallbladder removed in August of 1983, while she was still in the hospital's care, she got pneumonia. Now, during the course of the trial, you'll hear from Millie herself. Millie is a resident of Appleton. She's lived here all her life. She grew up here. She went to school here. She works here. She works in a local IBM office. She's worked there for 10 years. Millie got married to a local boy, and she lived here and was raising her family here. She has 2 children, and they attend school right here in Appleton. Now, on August 2nd, when Millie went to St. Joseph's Hospital, the defendant in this case, she had a gallbladder removed. And when the gallbladder was removed, she was sent back to her room to recover. By the side of her bed was one of these. It's a Respirex. This device is given to all patients who have major abdominal surgery. Now, the reason it's given is that after a surgery, because of the pain involved in the incisions across the abdomen, the patient will not want to deep as breathing as she should. And if she doesn't breathe deeply, fluid and bacteria can build up in her lungs, causing pneumonia. Now you might ask yourself, what went wrong here? What went wrong is Millie was never told how to use this device. To work the device, the patient must inhale, causing this little ball to rise up to 2. The higher the ball goes, the more air the patient's getting in her lungs. The more air she's getting in her lungs, the better she's doing. But Millie, who didn't know how to use it, assumed, as many laymen do, that you blow into it. When you blow into it, the ball doesn't rise. After a while, she just got frustrated and stopped using it. Now, Millie will tell you, when she went to St. Joseph's Hospital, she trusted them. After all, this is the hospital that she was born in. Millie will tell you that the hospital staff promised to take care of her, and when they did, she put her care in their hands. When Millie left the hospital 8 days later, she had a case of pneumonia so severe that she couldn't leave the house for days. And that's why she's suing the defendant at St. Joseph's Hospital. After you hear from Millie, you hear from several of the defendant's employees. You hear from the doctor that treated her. You hear from the nurses that tried to care for her. And in their defense, they will claim that Millie's illness was her own fault. They'll claim that they couldn't be everywhere at once. But when they tell you this, ask yourself one question. Who could take care of this woman who had just been through major surgery, if not the hospital employees? They claim they followed all hospital procedures to ensure that Millie didn't get ill. But when they tell you this, listen to them. Listen to them carefully. Because when you do, you will find that there is no proof. There is no proof in the record whatsoever. The record that they themselves created. Now, the evidence will show that Millie's illness could have been prevented. The hospital staff had only taken the time to put a pen to a piece of paper. Only a few seconds of their time would have prevented Millie from having days of illness and pain. Now, members of the jury, at the end of this trial, it'll be clear to you that the defendant in this case, St. Joseph's Hospital, was solely responsible for Millie's injuries. And at that time, Mr. Blum will get up here and summarize what has happened today. And after that, you'll be asked to come back with a verdict. And when you come back, I ask you to come back for a verdict for the plaintiff, Millie Moot. Thank you.
Does the defense wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
You may proceed.
May it please the court, counsels, members of the jury, this case is not what the plaintiff would have you believe. In fact, it is something far more simple, something far more basic. It's based on a concept that each of us uses in our daily lives. It is something that each of us uses on a daily basis. And it is the very basis of our justice system. It is the concept of responsibility. Now, it is the responsibility of a hospital and its staff to administer effective medical treatment. And I submit to you, members of the jury, that that responsibility was, in fact, upheld by the defendants. But in addition, there is a responsibility on the part of a patient to work with that staff, to take responsibility for their own health care and make sure that the health care that is administered is done so effectively and that patient can leave the hospital healthy. Good morning, members of the jury. My name is Tamara Nidell. Along with my co-counsel, Leanne Mosier, we represent the defendants in this case, St. Joseph's Hospital and Dr. Janet Cheeseborough. The defendants are before you today as a consequence of unfair and false accusations presented by the plaintiff. The plaintiff would have you believe that we are here today because the hospital and Dr. Cheeseborough were exclusively responsible for the plaintiff's health care. Take a moment, if you will, and think about what you do as individuals to ensure that your health care is in the best possible hands and that that health care is successful. When you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. When you have stomach problems, you seek out medical help. When you get a prescription, you fill that prescription and you follow the doctor's orders and you take that prescription so that you can get well. Now, that is not terribly unlike the case at hand. The plaintiff did just that. She suffered from pain, so she went to Dr. Cheeseborough. She was diagnosed as needing a gallbladder surgery, a cholecystectomy. She admitted herself into the hospital. But that's where this case differs from anyone else in this room, a responsible individual. Because when she walked through those hospital doors, she left her responsibility at home. Now, during the course of this trial, you will have an opportunity to meet a number of witnesses. Among them will be Dr. Janet Chesebrough herself, a woman who is very capable in the medical field and in fact has 22 years of experience. You will also have the opportunity to meet the 3 nurses who attended the plaintiff while she stayed at St. Joseph's Hospital. Combined, they have 42 years of medical experience, and individually, they represent a very competent nursing staff. Their testimony will reveal a number of important facts. One of those facts is that the plaintiff failed in her responsibility, where the hospital did not. They, in fact, fulfilled their duty, their responsibility to reasonably record the patient's progress while she was staying at St. Joseph's Hospital. That responsibility was fulfilled. Their testimony will also reveal a harsh reality about medical care these days, that there is a substantial absence of resources. There is a lack of resources, which places greater responsibility on the patient to take their treatment and their care far more seriously and not leave their responsibility at home, as did the plaintiff. Now, you will hear a tremendous amount of testimony and have an opportunity to view some rather intricate documents on the part of the patient recorded by the hospital. And this will cover medical and technical lingo that may tend to be confusing. When you review this, I ask you to keep 2 things, very important things, in mind. One of those is that the bottom line of this case is not whether or not the patient underwent improper treatment. That is not the issue here. It is whether the patient's physical and emotional and medical treatment was sufficiently recorded in the hospital's documentation, and that she too must take a responsibility for her own health care. And the second is that the best way to tackle a case of this kind is to use something that is not on the cutting edge of medical technology or legal lingo for that matter. Something that all of us in this room share commonly, and that is to apply your common sense. Now, members of the jury, I submit to you that at the close of this morning's trial, you will be able to hand down a verdict consistent with the law that applies to this case, consistent with the facts that will be presented to you throughout the course of this trial, consistent with justice. That will be a verdict in favor of the defendant that they upheld their duty to responsibly and reasonably record the plaintiff's progress while at St. Joseph's Hospital, and that in fact, if any blame is to be placed, it is upon the plaintiff for failing in her duty to take her health care into her own hands. Thank you very much.
Is the plaintiff ready to proceed?
We're ready, Your Honor.
Call your first witness.
Call Ms. Millie Monia.
Ms. Monia, raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you.
Please be seated.
Good morning. Can you please state your name for the record?
Millie Lisa Monia.
May I call you Millie?
Yes.
Where do you live, Ms. Monia? Millie.
I live in Appleby, Pennsylvania.
And how long have you lived there?
All of my life.
Do you have any family?
Yes, I do.
Tell me about it.
I'm married and I have 2 children. Eli is 11 and Abby is 7.
And your husband?
And my husband is 40.
Are you employed?
Yes, I am.
And where do you work?
I'm employed at IBM in the sales department.
How long have you worked there?
I've worked there for 10 years now.
Have you ever been hospitalized?
Yes, I have.
And where was that?
At St. Joseph's Hospital here in Appleby.
Why were you there?
I went in for gallbladder surgery. I believe it was in August of 1983.
Before you had this operation and you were in the hospital, did you ever have any preoperative care?
Not that I can remember. No pre-op. I talked to the staff quite a bit, the nurses. I was a little nervous, so I asked them where I'd be cut and how big the incision would be and things like that, and they told me, they showed me where and they told me. They also told me that when I came out of surgery that I'd have IV for a while, so I'd be prepared for that. And I asked them if I'd be okay, and they said basically I'd have a lot of trouble walking, or I'd have to breathe a lot, and I'd have to breathe very deeply, and I'd be coughing a bit, and I might have trouble walking around for a little bit, but they would help me. They assured me that I'd be fine and to put myself in their hands.
So did they make a promise that they would take care of you afterwards?
Oh yes, they were very nice. They were wonderful. I was sure they'd take care of me. They were very nice before I went into surgery, and I was confident that I'd be in good hands.
Okay, and after that you had the surgery.
Yes.
After the surgery, what happened?
I was really groggy. I think I was in a recovery room for a little while, I remember basically, and then I went back to my room.
Okay, how long were you supposed to be there?
Well,
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is not qualified to indicate whether or not she knows how long she is supposed to be staying.
Sustained.
Did the doctor tell you how long you would be there?
yes, he did.
And how long did he say you would be there for?
Dr. Ponsborough told me about 5 days was the maximum time for my type of surgery.
And are you there, in fact, for 5 days?
No, I was there for about 8 days.
Why?
I was very sick after my surgery, so I had to stay longer.
Oh, you said you were sick. How so?
When I came out of the surgery, I had a lot of pain in my stomach, and I had problems going to the bathroom. And then I started having a lot of trouble breathing. It hurt greatly to take in deep breaths, and when I coughed, it hurt terribly. So I started to get really very, very sick. I was in an awful shape. And it was about, I was probably a day or two after that, they told me that I had pneumonia.
Okay. Did this cause you any pain?
I had a lot of pain. I couldn't breathe. Just breathing in hurt greatly, and I couldn't get up and walk around by myself. Someone had to help me. Any type of movement at all that I did, if I just moved in my bed, I had great pain throughout my chest. My kidneys also were bothering me. I had problems going to the bathroom sometimes, and I just had a lot of pain in my stomach, but anything I did at this time hurt. I was in a lot of pain.
Did you ever hear of a device called a Respirex?
Yes, I did.
And when did you hear of this? First time?
It was after my operation. I was told that I was supposed to use a Respirex. I don't remember exactly when because I had a lot of Demerol, but I was told that I was supposed to use the Respirex.
Do you remember speaking to a respiratory therapist?
No, it was one of those nurses who had worked with me. They were very, very good with me, the daycare and the evening nurses, and they came in and told me that I'd have to use it.
Did they ever show you how to use the device?
No, not that I remember. They just said that, they showed me where it was. I knew it was near my bed and that I was supposed to use it as much as I could. They told me as many times as possible. So I just said, all right, but I don't remember accurately learning how to use it.
And did there come a time when you stopped using the Respirex?
Well, I tried to use it. I had a lot of Demerol, so every once in a while, and I'd wake up and I remember to use it, I would blow into it, and the ball never moved, so I just didn't use it.
And when did there come a time when you found out the correct way to use the Respirex?
The day I was leaving, I learned
Objection,
how.
Your Honor. I believe the witness's testimony will be hearsay.
Well, there are witnesses here who will be able to corroborate her story, who will be called by either the plaintiff or the defense. So I believe she's confident to testify.
Maybe somewhere outside the presence of the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, there's reason to believe that the testimony of the witness will be a reflection of a conversation with a respiratory therapist who is in fact not here and not able to be called as a witness.
Is there any evidence in the record that these medical log, these conversations took place?
No, Your Honor, there are not.
Then your objection's sustained.
Your Honor, if I may be heard, under Rule 803-4, statements for the purpose of medical diagnosis or treatment, this is an exception to the hearsay rule and should be admitted to evidence.
How does that come in, counsel?
It's under 803-4 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, statement for the purpose of diagnosis or treatment. A statement made for the purpose of medical diagnosis or treatment and describing medical history of past or present symptoms of pain, sensation, or inception of general catastrophe.
Wouldn't that come from a record of some sort?
Your Honor, as this case is about, the record is not clear, and all we have, the witness's testimony. This is what someone said to the witness, and I believe she should be competent to testify to that.
I'm still going to sustain the objection.
Did anyone in this, did anyone of the people that cared for you and that are in this courtroom today ever explain to you how to use the respirators?
No.
I have nothing. I have nothing at this time, although I reserve for redirect.
Any cross, counsel? You may proceed.
Mrs. Mooney, you went to Dr. Jonesboro because you were in pain and were quite concerned that there was something wrong with you. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you needed major surgery, didn't you?
Yes.
In fact, it was your gallbladder, and it's quite painful, isn't it?
It was painful, yes.
When you went into the hospital, you stated on that you left your health care 100% in the care of the nurses and doctors. Isn't that correct?
No, they assured me that they would take care of me, so I just, when I was getting ready for surgery, they said they would take care of me, and I believe them.
So you allowed them to take care of you.
When a nurse tells me they're about to put me under, that I'll be okay, I believe them.
Thank you. Now, yes or no? When you went into the hospital, did you allow the nurses and the doctors to have 100% care of your health?
I told them that I just went in the hospital and assumed they would take care of me.
So in fact, you took no responsibility for your own health care, did you?
When I'm on a lot of drugs, I can take care of myself. When I'm really out of it, I just assumed that they would monitor me.
So you did no self-monitoring at all, did you?
I was drugged out. I couldn't do anything. I just slept all
Mrs.
the
Monia,
time.
in fact, you didn't even take the time to ask a simple question as to why you were in the hospital longer than you were supposed to, did you?
I was given Demerol so much, I didn't know what day, what hour, what minute it was. I'd
Mrs.
wake
Monia,
up.
do you now...
Objection, Your Honor. We would ask that counsel be admonished to allow the witness to finish her answer.
She may finish her answers.
Are you ready to finish?
Yeah.
So in fact, you now know the medical effect of Demerol.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
You're able to testify here today as a medical expert to the effect of the Demerol?
No, I'm talking about a patient who's given a lot of Demerol. I know what it did to me.
When you were in the hospital, did you at any time ask a doctor or a nurse why you were remaining in the hospital for 4 additional days?
I thought it was just care,
So you didn't
post-op
bother to
care.
ask, did you?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel should allow the witness to finish her answer.
Counsel, please let the witness respond. And then if she's proving to be unresponsive, you may ask her to respond to your questions.
Have you finished your answer, Mrs. Mooney?
Mm-hmm.
You were also once again irresponsible about your own health care in regard to the Resprex, weren't you?
No. I used it. I tried. I just didn't know how. I don't think that was irresponsible.
Actually, the nurses taught you how to use it twice, didn't they?
Not that I can really remember.
So, the nurses encouraged you, though, didn't they?
Oh, they told me that I should use it, but they never came in and said time to use the Resprex. They just said you should use it.
And in fact, you knew you were supposed to use it quite often.
When I woke up and when I was feeling really coherent, I did try, but that was about it.
Mrs. Mooney, yes or no? Did you know you were supposed to use
sure.
the Resprex?
Yes, I knew.
And the nurses in your room encouraged you to use it?
No, they told me I had to. They didn't encourage the use.
They never once encouraged the use of the Resprex.
They told me I had to use it as often as I should. They came in and told me I should use it, but they never came in and said, did you use it? Time to use it. They told me I had to.
Mrs. Monia, I'd like to show you. Let me find it. It's not close. Do you recognize this, Mrs. Monia?
Oh yeah, this is my statement.
How do you recognize her?
I gave it to my lawyer.
Whose signature is this at the bottom?
Mine.
Mrs. Monia, directing your attention to the first sentence in this paragraph, could you read it to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
May I have it back? Thank you. Mrs. Monia, did the nurses encourage you to use the Resprex?
I put encouraging there. I don't mean they came in and said time to use it. As I said before, they said you have to use it, but they never told me time to use the Resprex. They just said you should use it.
So, Mrs. Monia, when you were using the Resprex, the nurses were in the room at the time?
No.
They were never in the room at the time you used the Resprex?
I would hope not. They should have showed me how to use it then.
They were in the room encouraging you to use the Resprex, but then they didn't wait for you to
No,
use
they
it?
would just come in my room and say, you have to use the Resprex, and you're supposed to use it a lot. And I said, all right, I will. And they never stayed to actually watch me use it or to teach me how to use it.
So it is your testimony here today that 3 nurses, an evening shift, a day shift, and a night shift, never once witnessed you using the Resprex?
No. They only came in, they didn't come in a lot. They said I was sleeping all the time. So, you know, the Demerol had me really kind of whacked out. So when they would come in, they would check on me. And when I was awake enough to talk to them, they'd say, use the rest breaks. And I'd say,
All right, let me get this straight. You were drugged so that you don't really remember them not teaching you, correct?
mm-hmm.
Objection, counsel's testifying.
It's cross.
But yet you were so drugged that you don't remember them teaching you, but yet you're awake enough to remember that they did teach you.
I don't remember ever being taught. And I didn't use it correctly. So I'd have to think that I never used it correctly.
But you were awake enough to remember that they didn't teach you, correct?
Oh, I know they didn't teach me.
But yet you were too groggy to remember much else.
I came in and out of my grogginess, so I did know that I didn't know how to use it. I was blowing into it, which I understand is totally wrong.
Mrs. Monia, when you were blowing into it and figuring out that nothing was going on, why didn't you take the responsibility to ask a nurse when they came into the room how to correctly use it?
They were busy. If they came in right after and I was thinking about it, I could tell them. But when they came in, if it wasn't the top thing on my mind, I didn't ask them.
Your own health care was not the top thing on your mind, Mrs. Monia?
I had a lot of Demerol. And when I was coherent, I was coherent. When I wasn't, I wasn't.
So when you were coherent, Mrs. Monia, you did not take the time to ask a nurse how to properly use something
thought I
so
was.
vital to your care.
I thought I was, and I didn't know how vital to my care it was.
You thought you were using it correctly when the ball never moved.
I thought that maybe that was I knew that something wasn't right, but I just blew into it and then it hurt, so I quit.
Mrs. Monia, you were home for a week and a half after your surgery, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, it had been major surgery, very painful for you, wasn't it?
Yes.
So how do you know, Mrs. Monia, that you were home because of the pneumonia and not because of the surgery?
My lungs were what kept me home. I was in a lot of pain from the pneumonia.
Are you now testifying as a medical expert that you know beyond a reasonable doubt that you were home 1.5 weeks longer due to your
My
pneumonia?
lungs are here. My incision was somewhere else. I know what hurt.
But can you testify as a medical expert, 100% sure, that you were home because of the pneumonia and not because of the medical
I'm not a
surgery?
medical expert. I'm telling you
Thank
what
you.
hurt.
No further questions.
Any redirect, counsel?
No.
Mrs. Monia, you are excused. Does plaintiff have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. We call Janet Chesbrough to the stand, please.
Dr. Chesbrough? Dr. Chesbrough, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated.
Your name's Janet Chesbrough?
That's correct.
You're a doctor employed at St. Joseph's Hospital here in Appleby, right?
That's correct.
How long have you been there?
22 years.
And you are Millie's private physician at that time, or
That's
you were?
correct.
You treated her for cholecystectomy?
Correct.
And you are a named defendant in this case, isn't that
That's
right?
correct.
If you were to lose, you would lose a substantial amount of money, isn't that correct?
That's certainly correct.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move to have this witness be declared a hostile witness and grant greater latitude in our examination.
Any argument?
No, Your Honor.
Motion granted.
Dr. Chesbrough, July 29th, 1983. Do you remember that date?
I don't remember it as something substantial unless it was pointed out to me.
Well, that's the day that Millie came into your office complaining of right upper abdominal pain, isn't that correct?
If that's what my record says, yes.
And your prescribed course of treatment was to perform a cholecystectomy?
That's correct.
You put her in the hospital on August 2nd, correct?
I believe so.
And you planned the surgery the next day?
That's correct.
Now, Dr. Chesbrough, you're familiar with the procedures at St. Joseph's Hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the procedures for admission? Are you familiar with the procedures for admitting patients?
Certainly.
Could you please tell the jury here what are those procedures?
The procedures are you perform the examination in your office, you make a decision, a diagnosis by lab value physical findings, and by patient complaints, and you track it for a while, and then if it becomes more acute, you admit them to the hospital. They get, they're aware of what's going to take place in the hospital, what the operation entails, what's the risk. They get labs and usually follow x-rays if they're needed. They get introduced to the admitting staff, the nurses' staff, physicians, anesthesiologists. Anesthesia usually comes in, tells them about the anesthesia they're going to receive, and they're asked if there's any questions about their preoperative care.
Were you there when all this explanation took place to Millie?
I was in the hospital.
Were you there when all these supposed explanations and descriptions were given to Millie?
I was in the hospital making rounds.
Were you in the room?
No, I was not.
So you don't know whether or not Millie was told about what to expect after her surgery, do you?
It was written in the nurse's note and in my progress note.
Do you personally do not know what was told to Millie about her post-operative care, do you?
No, I do not.
You do not know what specifically was told to her about her rehabilitation, do you?
I know what procedures are in my hospital.
I understand that, but I'm asking whether you know specifically what was told to Millie.
No, I do not.
Part of your prescribed course of treatment for Millie's rehabilitation after her surgery was for ambulation, correct?
That's correct.
And this is to help her expand her lungs and keep her moving and I'm not quite sure. Maybe you could explain the jury what this all
You ambulate anyone as soon as you can. When someone needs to go under general anesthesia, the whole body's compromised, most particularly the lungs. So you need to get moving so that the normal processes of the human body take place. And it helps healing, it helps recovery.
What do you mean by compromise the lungs?
Well, when you're intubated, it puts your lungs, so to speak, not on your own use. And general anesthesia essentially paralyzes you.
What
Does
is it?
paralyze
I'm
it.
sorry. You finished?
Yes, sir.
Would you please explain to the audience the effect of general anesthesia on a patient's ability for cognitive retention?
People understand that when they're going to sleep and getting intubated, it's a tube that goes down to their lungs to help. That's their breathing process at that time.
If you tried to teach them something prior to that, what would be the chances of them successfully recalling it after surgery?
I would say they'd recall it. I would recall it.
A part of Millie's post-operative care, in addition to ambulation, was to do coughing and deep breathing exercises, correct?
That's correct.
And you also prescribed the use of a Respirex, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Showing you, Your Honor, may I approach the
Yes.
witness? Showing you what's been admitted into evidence by stipulation as Plaintiff's Exhibit B, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
That's an Respirex.
Could you please tell the jury its function and purpose?
They're supposed to use it minimally, usually about once every hour, as quickly post-operatively as they can. It helps expand the lungs.
How does it do that?
You have to suck in on this. The nurses know more about this than I do. I know the function of it. They know how to use it.
You don't know how to use it.
I know how to use it.
Doctor, in fact, you did prescribe Respirex for Millie after her surgery, isn't that correct?
Certainly do.
Prescribed it on August 4th, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you prescribed it to be used every hour.
That's correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you what's been admitted into evidence as Plaintiff's Exhibit A. Do you recognize that document?
I certainly do.
That's the patient's log, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's Millie's log when she stayed in your hospital, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You rely on that log, don't you?
Certainly do.
Because that charts the patient's progress throughout her course of stay, doesn't it?
That's correct.
It charts out all the things that were done, right?
Yes.
All the things that weren't done.
Yes.
And you rely on that when you continue you rely upon that to make your continued course of treatment, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You use it to spot things that are not right,
That's correct.
things that are going wrong.
Mhm.
Now, doctor, you would agree with me that it's the proper procedure at St. Joseph's Hospital to record in that log such things as when preoperative care takes place, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You would agree with me, doctor, that a nurse who does the preoperative care should put that notation down there.
I agree that it should be put down.
And in fact, it was put down there, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So doctor, you were trying to tell the jury that you completed the preoperative care after the surgery took place?
That could be that the paperwork was completed at that point.
Which
Doesn't mean
paperwork
that-
was that?
that the preoperative care sheet.
Permission to approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
That would be this document right here. What I'm showing you is Exhibit J.
That's correct?
That's the preoperative care sheet that the nurse does with the patient, right?
That's correct.
Step by step, the things they're supposed to cover, right? Could you please turn to the back side, and on the lower left-hand side, I think it is, there's a box there, checked coughing and deep breathing. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Doesn't say Respirex there, does it?
No, sir.
So based on that form, Millie was never instructed on the use of a Respirex prior to her surgery. Isn't that correct?
Prior to her surgery, that could be correct. This is a normal procedure. The cough and deep breathing, you would only order Respirex if indeed they were not cough and deep breathing.
And you ordered the Respirex on August 4th,
Yes?
even though the surgery took place on August 3rd.
Yes?
So, doctor, whose fault is it that the postoperative care is logged in the record as occurring after surgery? Is it your fault,
It could be.
or is it the nurse's fault?
Depends on who does it.
Well, wouldn't it be important to know what time surgery took place?
Certainly would.
Because a nosocomial pneumonia takes, what, about 24 to 36 hours to turn?
Yes?
So wouldn't you want to know, if you were watching for this, whether or not it occurred when the surgery took place, so you knew when to watch for it?
I don't understand your question.
Well, let me try this a different way. You're aware of nosocomial illnesses, right?
Certainly.
Please tell the jury what a nosocomial illness is.
Nosocomial illness is one that's acquired while you're in the hospital. You don't usually come into the hospital with it.
And Millie caught pneumonia, right?
Yes.
She didn't come into the hospital with it.
No, she
she-
came in for a gallbladder.
She got it in your place of employment, correct?
Yes,
And one of the chief defenses in that is the use of the Respirex, isn't that correct?
that's correct.
So as you were monitoring Millie's progress after surgery, you would want to know how well Millie's doing on that Respirex, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You'd want to know so you'd be able to diagnose whether or not she had a nosocomial infection, isn't that correct?
By using this, you want,
You'd want to know her progress on that, so you could make the
Certainly.
diagnosis. And isn't it a fact that that record doesn't show any progress on the Respirex throughout the entire course of treatment?
no, I disagree with that. It does show that she was encouraged to use it.
Does it say where encouragement is on that scale on that Respirex?
No, but nor does it say that she was compliant with it either.
I understand. Dr. Chesborough, part of that, you also would encourage Millie to use the Respirex, wouldn't you?
Certainly.
Over the 8 days, you made, what, 14 visits to Millie's room, isn't that right?
Mhm.
And over those 14 days, or over those 14 visits, you only had her use it, what, 4 times?
These patients have to take some control for their own health.
I understand, but you only asked Millie to use it 4 times, isn't that correct?
I ordered it every hour while she was awake.
Doctor, you were there 14 times over 4 days. Isn't it a fact you only asked her to use it 4 times?
I'm not usually the one that asks it. I order it and the nurses carry out the orders.
Yes or no, please? You only asked her to use it 4 times, isn't that correct?
No,
You asked her to use it more?
I could have. I don't recall. I did not personally write it.
Wasn't important, right?
It's important that I ordered it, and that's why I write the orders. It's ordered every hour while awake. And the nurses know what every hour while awake means.
Doctor, you sent Millie for a chest x-ray on her 5th day, correct?
That's,
What is the purpose of sending a patient for a chest x-ray on her 5th day of recuperation?
she had been complaining
Complaining of what?
of hurting when it breathed.
It's not in the record, you know that? There's no record. Isn't it a fact that there's nothing in the record that says that Millie complained?
That's correct?
And you got the results of that chest x-ray on Millie's last day in the hospital on the 10th, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Showed the right upper pneumonia.
I believe it showed right lower lobe pneumonia.
Excuse me, you're absolutely right. And then 30 hours later, after you made that diagnosis, you sent Millie on her way, isn't that correct?
That's correct?
You didn't do a follow-up x-ray, did you?
No?
You didn't do a follow-up white blood count, did you?
No.
You didn't do a follow-up vital signs, did you?
She had vital signs before she's discharged.
Because if they were important to you, you would have put this information in the log, isn't that right?
In my log,
On Millie's log,
on the progress
on
note.
the progress report.
Yes, but these are designed for the hospital. They're not designed for court.
But this was the hospital, isn't that right?
That's
And
right.
don't you
And
think
she
it's...
was-
I'm sorry.
She had follow-up visit to have a follow-up visit with me 1 week after she was to be discharged.
And 1 week later, doctor, how were you supposed to know how she was the day you let her out? You didn't write it down. Isn't that right? It's on the last page.
It is written down how she was.
Really? What's her white blood count?
I didn't need a white blood count. She hadn't been particularly febrile.
But don't you need a white blood count to diagnose pneumonia?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is not a physician and cannot testify to that effect.
Doctor can deny it, Your Honor.
He's allowed a lot of latitude. This is a hostile witness. We have a medical expert. If Dr. Chesborough believes that counsel has misstated something, she's clearly competent in setting the record correct.
And 30 hours after you made your diagnosis, you sent her on her way?
That's right.
I have nothing further. Us?
Yes, Your Honor. Doctor, you mentioned on direct examination that you didn't know specifically and personally whether or not the patient, the plaintiff, had been told by the nurses, for instance, how to use a Respirex. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't that the whole point of hospital procedure, doctor?
That's correct.
So it's reasonable to believe that you would never specifically know whether a doctor has in fact, whether you as a doctor, whether you would know for a fact that the nurses have fulfilled that responsibility, would you?
Sometimes it should be written when it's ordered, and they usually do.
But that's
Sometimes
hospital procedure,
That's
isn't that right?
hospital procedure.
Doctor, isn't it also a fact that it is very possible that the 12 o'clock pre-op notation in the progress report was in fact made as a late entry?
That's correct.
And could you explain to us what a late entry is, please?
Late entry is one that could have been made the day before or earlier during that day, but you got to write it late at night, so it's denoted a late entry.
Is it significant whether or not it is actually noted on the progress report late entry?
Yes, it's significant.
Doctor, is it hospital procedure to teach a patient procedures, for instance, using Respirex, just as she's about to enter deep general anesthesia?
No,
So that is not likely to have occurred, is it?
that's correct.
In fact, did not occur in this case, did it?
That's correct.
Doctor, the plaintiff was admitted to St. Joseph's Hospital for a cholecystectomy. Is that right?
That's correct.
Isn't that procedure considered major surgery?
Yes, it is.
And a patient undergoing such a procedure would be under general anesthesia for approximately an hour, is that right?
That's correct.
Doesn't that make the patient susceptible to respiratory problems?
Certainly.
Could that include pneumonia?
Yes.
That might even include nosocomial pneumonia, would it not?
Yes.
And a hospital is not a sterile environment, is it?
No.
So infections of this kind...
They can happen.
Thank you, doctor. Nosocomial pneumonia is not, in fact, a rare postoperative complication, is it?
That's correct.
And it is rarely fatal, is it?
That's correct.
A patient, in fact, is under potential danger of nosocomial pneumonia as it being potentially fatal if that patient is elderly, right?
That's correct.
And maybe has a history of respiratory problems.
That's correct.
But isn't it a fact that the plaintiff is a young mother
That's correct.
and she has no history of respiratory problems, did she?
None that I was aware of.
And you would have known her medical history prior to this procedure, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Doctor, Mrs. Monia got nosocomial pneumonia while she was admitted to St. Joseph's Hospital, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Could you briefly describe what led up to this?
Well, she was...
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation. This witness has not demonstrated an ability to know what led up to the disease.
Your Honor, she is the treating physician and is sufficiently familiar with this case.
I believe we also stipulated at the outset that she was an expert with respect to care and treatment of this particular patient. So you may proceed.
Doctor, please, could you briefly explain what led up to this pneumonia?
Well, most often after someone has major surgery, if they're not turning, coughing, deep breathing, ambulating, it causes a compromise and you can get pneumonias.
What are the standard preventative procedures?
To have them ambulate, turn, cough, deep breathe, and possibly a Respirex if they're not doing Respirex and turn, cough, deep breathing will do the same thing.
Isn't it a fact, doctor, that you ordered ambulation and Respirex shortly following surgery?
That's correct.
That would be August 3rd, the same day of surgery, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And you ordered it again on August 4th and August 8th for the Respirex?
That's correct.
You ordered ambulation again on August 4th?
That's correct.
How do you know this?
Because that's my record. I have it written.
Why didn't you order coughing and deep breathing?
Because she wasn't doing it. You have to. Turn, cough, deep breathing is pretty normal post-operatively. The Respirex is what the patient has to have compliance with to help her own progress.
So with the exception of the device, the procedure is essentially the same, is it not?
That's correct.
So as long as a patient is doing either the coughing and deep breathing or the Respirex, it's okay, isn't that right?
As long as they're doing one of them.
Is a Respirex a life-saving device?
No, it's not.
What would you consider to be a life-saving device?
A respirator.
Something that would sustain a patient's life who might be in danger.
That's correct.
Yet, when the Respirex, for instance, is used, you expect it to be effectively recorded in a patient progress report, do you not?
That's correct.
How specific do those records need to be?
Well, it's ordered every hour while awake. I would expect for every shift it was documented how she did.
The patient didn't do the coughing and deep breathing, nor did she use the Respirex as you prescribed, did she?
Objection,
No.
Your Honor. Counsel's summing up and testifying here. If counsel has a question for the witness about the record, then let's have it. But otherwise, counsel's just making a generalized argument through another witness.
No, this is cross, and she has to lay the groundwork for her question. I will overrule your objection.
Again, doctor, the patient didn't use the coughing and deep breathing procedure nor the Respirex as you prescribed, did she?
That's correct.
How do you know this?
Because it's in my record, and when I go in and do my physical exams, she said it hurt and she wasn't doing it.
Mrs. Money sustained other post-operative problems, did she not?
That's correct.
So for her gastrointestinal problems, you ordered Mylanta.
That's correct.
And you used a physician's order form for that order, did you not?
That's correct.
And according to the patient progress report, Mylanta was in fact administered by the attending nurses.
That's correct.
For her urinary tract problems, is it not true that you ordered a straight catheterization
That's correct.
using a physician's order form?
That's correct.
Oh, what's the relevance of this line of questioning? We're dealing with the Respirex and her breathing, not her catheterization or Mylanta or stomach problems, Your Honor.
Out of the presence of the jury, counsel?
Your Honor, this case is an issue of recording the patient's progress with a focus on that, but that does not prevent us from delving into other issues that, with respect to the recording.
Your Honor, we're dealing with the progress of the Respirex and her breathing, not whether or not she could void or whether or not she had a bad stomach.
I'll allow a little bit more questioning, counsel, on this.
Doctor, for her urinary tract infections, is it not true that you used a physician's order form to order straight catheterization?
That's correct.
And according to the patient record, straight catheterization was in fact done on a number of occasions. Is that not right?
That's correct.
As her treating physician, doctor, what is your responsibility to ensure that your orders are followed by the patient?
I follow the nurse's notes and my progress notes as well as my physical exams.
How much do you depend on the progress report to track the progress of your patients?
About 95%
And the other 5%?
is in conclusion with my physical findings.
You make additional notations on that report, is that not right?
That's correct.
But your notations are cryptic at best, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Yet they are sufficient for the purposes of a patient progress report.
That's correct.
What exactly is the purpose of a patient progress report, doctor?
To follow the patient's progress. These are hospital designed so that when I need to look at them and see how she's doing, I can look above it as well as the nurse's notes and continue progress.
So who is the report made for?
It's made for myself.
It's
and
not, sir, go ahead.
And for the nurses.
So it's not made for a court of law, is it?
Absolutely not.
Doctor, are you aware that the plaintiff stayed home for an additional week and a half after her discharge.
Yes, I am.
Would that be considered unreasonable?
No,
Why not?
because most often people go home and regardless of their discharge instructions, you find they don't carry out what they were told to do, which would mean continue breathing exercises, continue walking around.
So in your professional opinion, and with your knowledge of this particular patient, can you, with any reasonable medical certainty, distinguish whether the plaintiff stayed home as a result of the pneumonia or as a result of the severe pain sustained after major surgery?
No, I cannot.
Thank you, doctor. No further questions.
Any redirect, counsel?
Briefly, Your Honor. Doctor, you say you expect the nurses to follow your orders?
That's correct.
You ordered Millie straight catheterized every 12 hours PRN, is that correct?
That's correct.
You know for a fact, you know that the nurses didn't follow your orders, don't you?
No, I don't know that.
Well, directing your attention to the record, on August 4th, Millie was catheterized at 1 o'clock in the morning, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And again on August 4th at 9:30, she was catheterized again, isn't that also correct?
That's correct.
That's not 12 hours, is it?
Sir, it says PRN, that means when necessary.
I understand. When Millie was first admitted to the hospital, you ordered Benadryl, 50 milligrams, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And that was for what? It's an antihistamine, isn't that right?
Not always, it can be used as a mild sleeper.
And you gave it to Millie to help her sleep?
The night before surgery, certainly.
You wrote it down in the record, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, isn't it a fact that no nurse ever gave Millie her Benadryl?
That's correct.
Because it doesn't say so in the record, right?
That's correct.
So the nurses did not follow your orders, isn't that correct?
They didn't follow that one.
Okay, then what about the heparin, 5,000 cc's? You ordered that after surgery, isn't that correct?
What did I order?
Heparin. Would you like me to show you your order?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
Surely.
Showing you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit D. Do you see the first entry there?
Yes, I do.
It says Demerol and heparin, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
5,000 cc's of heparin?
It says 5,000 units. yes.
Units, I'm sorry. Could you please tell the jury what heparin is used for?
Heparin is used to help thin the blood.
Was it important to Millie's course of treatment?
I order what's important.
So it would have been important to you to know whether or not Millie got that heparin.
That's correct.
You know that Millie did not get that heparin, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Because it's not in the record.
I know that's not written in the record.
So what, some nurse gave it and didn't write it down? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's not written in the record.
So in other words, based on this, 7 years later, as far as you know, the heparin was never given to Millie.
Looking at what's written on the record, that's correct.
I have nothing further.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor, one question. Doctor, isn't it a fact that medications are not recorded on a patient progress report?
Right, they're corrected on the medication sheet.
Thank you. No further questions.
Doctor, you may be excused. Thank you for your testimony. Are counsel for the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to call to the stand Lucinda Gates.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. You need some water? There's some water. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Gates. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Lucinda Gates.
And are you currently employed?
Yes, I am.
Where are you employed at this time?
I'm employed at St. Joseph's Hospital in Pennsylvania.
How long have you worked there?
I've been there 14 years.
What is your position at St. Joseph's Hospital?
I am the charge nurse on the day shift.
What are the hours of the day shift?
The day shift normally starts at 7 and normally ends at 3:30.
Could you describe generally what duties consist of for a charge nurse during the day?
A charge nurse is not a caregiving nurse. She is the nurse that is responsible to see that all of the physician's orders for the 30 patients on the unit are taken off. They are sent to the correct laboratories or x-ray departments, and that all of doctor's orders are carried out.
What, if any, differences exist between your duties as a charge nurse during the day and those of an evening or night shift?
An evening charge nurse normally has a patient complement as well, meaning that she is both a caregiver nurse and the charge nurse. She has responsibilities toward direct care of the patient.
How many patients are usually on a floor for the surgical unit at one time?
This particular unit is a 30-bed unit, and there are only 2 semi-privates.
As a charge nurse, are you responsible for the entire unit?
Yes, ma'am.
In August of 1983, were you also primarily a caretaker for Mrs. Monia?
Yes, I was.
For what was she in the hospital at that time?
She had been admitted for a cholecystectomy,
How long is a patient usually hospitalized for that type of surgery?
usually between 5 and 6 days.
And how long was Mrs. Monia hospitalized?
I believe Mrs. Moniz would stay with us another 4 days.
What, if anything, made her situation different from other patients of this type?
She developed nosocomial pneumonia.
Mrs. Gates, 7 years later, how do you remember all of this?
I reviewed the chart.
Was this information in the chart?
Yes, it is.
What types of paperwork and records were kept in Miss Monia's case?
As in all cases, there are the doctor's the doctor's order sheet, the progress notes, which the nurses and doctors record in. There is also a flow sheet that records various vital signs. There is the post-op and the pre-op records.
What type of information is kept in the doctor's orders?
The doctor's orders are the directions to the nurses as to what we are allowed to do as far as medications or any other treatments doctor so desires.
Who do the doctors prepare this report for?
They prepare it for the nurses on the unit.
What type of information is kept in both the pre-op and post-op record?
Pre-op record consists basically of pre-op teaching and what the patient should expect at the time of surgery. Post-op is also what will be the end results of the surgery. It is also teaching for.
Who prepared this pre-op, post-op record for Mrs. Monia?
I believe I did.
Directing your attention to it, let me check to see if you have it there. No, you don't. Let me get a hand. May I approach?
Yes.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what do you recognize it as?
This is our nursing pre-op, post-op instructions.
Is that your signature at the bottom on the back?
Yes, it is.
And so you prepared that?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you state what this box reads as?
This is our measures to prevent post-operative complications. Post-operative complications are prevented by coughing, turning, deep breathing, and you include the patient in all of the demonstration. In other words, when you instruct her, she has to give this back to you.
Was this box checked for Mrs. Monia?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mean it was done under your care for Mrs. Monia?
Yes, ma'am.
Going to the progress report, what is the purpose of the progress report?
The progress report is an informational tool that is used to document the daily occurrences of the patient and how she is improving or not improving.
What hospital procedures are used when keeping a progress record?
Well, basically, they're written in terms that are cryptic for general reading, but are very well noted for and very well known for medical personnel.
Is it written in medical technical language?
Some of it is, yes. We may use abbreviations like WBC to mean white blood count.
For whose purpose is the progress record prepared?
For other medically oriented people.
Is the progress record written specifically for layman's purposes?
No.
What is your own personal procedure when you keep a progress record?
I document changes in a patient's status. both negative or positive. I would not document something such as giving a patient a daily bath. Those things are assumed to have been done. But I would not document them as far as the progress notes go.
Where is medication documented?
There is a separate medication record that each nurse must sign when the medication is administered.
What exactly then is not included nor expected to be included in a progress report?
Progress notes should not include daily care items. They should not include bathing, brushing teeth. There is a flow sheet that has a checklist, and all of that is checked off on those. Medications do not go on progress notes. Sometimes when a patient returns to a unit and there is, from an x-ray, and has just returned to bed, that may not be recorded.
What, if any, complications occurred after Mrs. Monia's surgery?
Those would be recorded on progress notes. And they would also be brought to my attention from the caregiving nurse, and I in turn would speak with doctor about them.
In regard to the Resprex, what type of item and use of language would you use in recording the Resprex in the progress report?
Most nurses, and myself I have to include in this, would simply note that the patient was encouraged. The reason for that is every time you walk in the room, you say to the patient, don't forget to use your Resprex. That's encouragement. I do not believe that I would stand there and write used Resprex 3 times a day.
When medication is ordered, do you keep it, do you mark it down on the other sheet?
Yes, that's a legal responsibility.
Mrs. Monia had certain complications after surgery. What were they?
I believe she developed some urinary retention problems, some additional abdominal pain, and the nosocomial pneumonia.
Are these complications unusual? Are they life-threatening? What is the standard procedure used when a patient complains of stomach pains?
Normally, they have a Mylanta order, or milk magnesia, Mylanta order for calming the stomach.
Was this done for Mrs. Monia?
I believe it was, yes.
How are you familiar with that
I
fact?
believe Dr. ordered it on his order sheet.
What is the standard procedure for respiratory problems?
Usually Resprex, turning and coughing and deep breathing.
Was this done for Mrs. Monia?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that?
Because of 2 reasons. Number 1, it was ordered by doctor, and orders are carried out by nurses from a physician's order sheet. The second thing is that our hospital is very acute into certain nursing standards of care, and this is one of the pre-op and post-op nursing standards of care necessary and is always used.
Were you personally in charge of Miss Monia's pre-op, post-op care?
Yes, I was.
Was Miss Monia familiar with the Resprex?
Quite familiar.
Objection, Your Honor, as to whether or not she was familiar with it. This witness has no knowledge of what Miss Monia knew about the Resprex. She can only testify as to what she told him.
Counsel, why don't you lay a little bit more of a foundation for how Ms. Monia might have been familiar with the Resprex?
I asked the answer be stricken from the record.
Yes, that answer will be stricken. Lay some foundation for the circumstances regarding the Resprex.
Was Miss Monia taught how to use the Resprex?
Yes. When a patient is admitted to a hospital and you're doing pre-op instruction, part of the pre-op instruction is the explanation of the Resprex and a demonstration by the patient back. Ms. Monia is a young woman, relatively young. She is also appears to be very intelligent. Because of these 2 assessments made on my part and her demonstration back, I would assume that she could take the responsibility of using the Resprex.
How many times did...
I would ask that the witness's assumption be stricken from the
Yes.
record.
The jury will disregard the assumption of Ms. Monia's understanding.
How many times did you teach Miss Monia how to use the Resprex?
2 times.
And at what time did you teach her?
I taught her pre-operatively when she was alert and oriented, And post-operatively, when the Demerol had worn off, and we reviewed it with her.
Is the Resprex difficult to use?
No, ma'am.
Could you demonstrate for the jury how to use the Resprex?
There are, you have to suck in on the respirator and the Resprex so that the ball is elevated to these numbers. A normal non-smoker can probably get it up about 1,200. Some non-smokers have more difficulty. And post-operatively, you would probably keep it down in the lower range.
Could you demonstrate for us, please?
Lower it.
Why don't we just...
Down.
If you could you stand in order for the jury?
You blow out,
Oops, I think it's...
and then
Let's move it a little. Okay, there we go.
blow out, and then you take a deep breath with this in your mouth.
That's the entire procedure?
Yes, ma'am.
What, if any, difficulties do patients find using the Resprex?
I don't know of any difficulty patients have using the Resprex.
After being taught once, are patients usually able to use the Resprex on their own?
Yes, and in addition to using the Resprex, they are taught a splinting procedure with abdominal surgery so that the intake is not as painful as if they did not know how to do this.
Is the procedure that you used to demonstrate to the jury today the same procedure you used to demonstrate to Mrs. Monia?
Yes, ma'am.
When was the Resprex ordered for Miss Monia?
I believe it was ordered the day after surgery. However, this is part of instruction and pre-op measures to prevent complications. And so the nurses would have reviewed it with her.
How often is a patient to use the Resprex?
Normally, they use it 4 to 5 times a day, but I believe doctor's order says once an hour.
And could you explain which doctor's orders you're referring to? Drawing your attention to right there. Was the Resprex ordered on August 3rd?
Yes, ma'am.
That was the same day Miss Monia had surgery, isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In regard to the Resprex, what is the nurse's responsibility?
The nurse's responsibility is to encourage the patient to continue to use it.
How often is a nurse supposed to do this?
The nurses in our unit are trained to state this to the patient every time they walk in the room.
Why is it, as it is ordered for every hour, a nurse is not able to be in the room every hour?
That is basically because we have a nursing shortage in Pennsylvania.
What would occur if a nurse was to be in the room every time a patient was supposed to use a Resprex on a 30-bed surgical floor?
It would
Your Honor, I object this entire line of questioning. It is wholly irrelevant to the case at bar.
Why is it irrelevant?
Whether or not this hospital is short-staffed has nothing to do with whether or not Millie knew how to use the Resprex, or whether or not it was documented correctly in the record.
Sustained.
What is the patient's responsibility for the Resprex?
to comply with the instructions given and how to use it.
What were your observations in regard to Mrs. Monia and the Resprex?
She was instructed on how to use it twice, post-operatively and post-operatively. I did not find Mrs. Monia very compliant. In fact, after she was there a while, her little 7-year-old was found to be playing with it one day.
Your Honor, I object to that. It's irrelevant to the case.
I don't think so. I think I'm going to overrule that objection. It seems that one of the issues is whether the patient was properly instructed and whether the patient herself interfered with her treatment. So the issue as to whether she was using it and allowing her child to play with it, I think goes to the merits of whether Ms. Monia was following the instructions.
Did you have any other observations about Mrs. Monia's responsibility towards the Resprex?
Yes, although she was reminded quite frequently to use it, she did not she did not do this.
How do you remember this 7 years later?
Partly from the chart and partly from certain patients they had in your mind better than others.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
What are you worried about? Hello, Ms. Gates. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Ms. Gates, before trial today, you spoke with Ms. Mosher about the trial, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you looked over the record to refresh your recollection of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you testified on direct that there are about 30 patients on your unit
Yes,
each
sir.
day. With that number in mind, can you give me a rough estimate of how many patients you've seen in the last 7 years since Ms. Money was in the hospital?
Objection to the relevancy of the line of questioning?
It goes directly to our memory, Your Honor.
I'll allow that.
We normally have a full complement of 30 patients a day.
But how many? Over 7 years.
I'm sorry, my math skills are not
Would,
best.
would it be more than 200 in 7 years?
Was 30.
Speculative?
I'll allow it within limits. One or two more questions, counsel.
Be more than 200
I'm
patients?
afraid I would have to defer to counselors' math abilities.
Would you, well, then, in your math abilities, Miss Gates, would you say you've seen more than 200 patients in 7 years?
Yes, sir.
You say you've seen more than 400 patients in 7
I'm
years.
sorry, as I said, my math
Objection, Your Honor. I
abilities.
asked and answered.
Counsel, I think that you've established that she's seen a number of patients over the 7-year period of time.
So it'd be safe to say then that the only reliable memory you have of Millie's particular treatment would be from the record you saw today. Other particulars of the treatment.
The particulars of the treatment.
One of those records that you're required to keep as a nurse is the patient progress report, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that is kept in accordance with hospital policy, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're required to keep these logs so that doctors and the other nurses can see what's going on with the patient, right?
Yes, sir.
And they in turn fill them out so that when you go and look at the patient, you can see what's going on with her, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you make entries into these logs, you include everything that you would consider important.
Yes, sir.
And from what you remember, the rest breaks was an important part of Ms. Moni's treatment, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
And you stated on direct that it's important during the treatment that the patient make progress with the rest breaks.
The rest breaks is part of the patient's care.
And because it's important that she make progress, you put down the progress that Millie was making with the rest breaks in the reports, correct?
The rest breaks is part of the patient's care and is recorded as such.
Okay, so you did, in fact, put down her progress in the report.
The progress the patient was making.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm handing you what's been previously entered into evidence as Exhibit A. This is Millie Moni's progress report.
Notice there are pages on the top and line numbers on the side. Miss Gates, I'd like to refer to you. Oh, does the word fair appear anywhere on the rest breaks, Miss Gates?
No, sir.
I'd like to direct your attention to the entry on the second page. That would be on 8/4/830. It reads, Respirax INC does fair. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Where does it say fair on the Respirax?
Objection, asked and answered. She already testified.
So it doesn't say fair.
No, sir.
Okay.
The rest breaks does not say fair.
Now, if you turn to page 3, on line 8, it's later that day at 9:30. You wrote down on line 8, using Respirax, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what level Millie was able to raise the ball to?
It has not been recorded.
Okay, thank you. And on the same page, line 11, 11 o'clock, the entry reads deep breathing, Respirax, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me now what level she was able to raise the ball to?
When a patient is taught deep breathing,
Can you tell me what level she raised the ball to? Yes or no?
Objection, can the witness answer the question?
I I think that he stopped his question and she's permitted to answer.
When a patient is taught deep breathing and coughing, and it is incorporated with the turning and the Respirex usage, it is more important to note that the use of the Respirex was done,
But you
rather than the Valium.
But you said that on direct, that the progress is important, didn't you?
The progress is also noted here by saying that she was turned and coughed and deep breathed
But-
and used it.
But on direct, you said the progress of using the Respirex was important, didn't you?
That is noted here.
That's what you said on direct examination.
That is noted here.
Oh, it says how well she was doing?
It says that she was using the Respirex.
But it doesn't say how well she was using it, does it?
Terminology such as fair or moderate are acceptable terminologies to nurses.
Oh, is that in your hospital's accepted form of abbreviations?
No, sir.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Gates, you said in your witness statement that you followed all hospital procedures when you treated Millie, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Part of the procedure is to teach the patient how to use the Respirex,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And you personally taught her.
Yes, sir.
And it's important to teach them because if they don't use it, they're going to get, or they have a greater chance of getting pneumonia.
Yes, sir.
And part of the hospital procedures when you teach them is to fill out what's known as a patient teaching form, correct?
Yes, sir.
May I approach you?
Yes.
I'm handing what's been previously marked into evidence as Exhibit L. This is the patient teaching form that was attached to Millie Monia's chart. That form isn't filled out, is it?
No, sir.
Thank you. And the progress report, that doesn't once mention that you taught Millie how to use the Respirex, does it? In the progress report, Exhibit A. I'll give you time if you need to look over it.
I believe it is on the pre and post app
I'll be getting
checklist.
to that in a moment. But on the progress report, does it say that you taught her?
Yes, sir. It says pre-app care completed, and it's
I don't-
signed by myself.
Does pre-op care completed mean Respirex taught?
Yes, sir. And the
Does it say that?
Yes, sir. It
It
does.
says Respirex taught.
Yes, sir. It
Can you
does.
point to me and say where it says Respirex taught?
Where it says pre-app care completed, you then look to the post
Excuse me.
and pre-app.
Ms. Gates, I'm asking you solely on this document. Do the words taught Respirex or anything that looks like that appear on the record? Anything that looks like it, remotely? Anything spelled similarly?
I believe this has been asked and answered, Your Honor, and the witness has explained her answer.
Your Honor, the witness is evading my questioning on attempting to
No,
pin it down.
Counselor, your witness is answering the question.
Nurse Gates, is there anything on the patient's progress report that says Respirex taught? Just yes or no?
No, sir.
No.
Now, Ms. Gates, you mentioned a preoperative pre-instruction record, correct?
Yes, sir.
That would be this document right here?
Yes, sir.
Turn around, please. Now, on the top of this, what does this line read that my finger's pointing to?
It says initials as discussed.
And does that mean that as you discuss this with the patient, you should put your initials next to the box? Is that
No,
what it
sir.
corresponds to? Oh, what does that mean in English?
We use a checkmark system
But
to indicate that these particular measures have been instructed on.
do the instructions on the form say check or do they say initial?
The
This is
signature
a
at the
reading
base.
question. Reading comprehension. Does it say initial?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the
Yes,
witness.
counsel, please
I'll move
refrain
on.
from being sarcastic.
I'll move on.
Ms. Gates, you wouldn't practice medicine without a license, would you?
No, sir.
And you would agree that giving narcotics to a patient, that would be considered practicing medicine, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you don't have a license to practice medicine, do you?
I do have a license to dispense medication.
But not to practice medicine.
Yes, sir.
Now, would you give medicine without a doctor's order? A narcotic without a doctor's order?
Not without a doctor's verbal or written order, no, sir.
Isn't it a fact that on August 3rd at 5:30 a.m., you gave Millie a shot of Demerol? If you'd like to refresh your memory, I'll hand you back the exhibit. It's on the first page.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it a fact that that's given without a doctor's order?
I believe the doctor instructed me to do this.
May I approach a witness?
Yes.
I'm handing you what's marked as Exhibit C into evidence, referring you to the second page. You read what item 10 says.
Demerol 100 milligrams, Q 3 hours, PRN for pain.
Now, at the bottom of that order standard, what's the day and time that that order was cut?
8/3, 2000 hours.
That would be 8 o'clock p.m.
Yes, sir.
And you gave her a shot at Demerol at 5:30 a.m. Are you aware that no doctor at that time had written an order for Demerol?
No, sir.
But but there must have been a doctor's order if you gave it.
There would have been.
But it's not in the record, is it?
No, sir.
I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. For what purpose is a progress report, for whose purpose is a progress report kept?
Progress reports are kept for the nurses and the physicians and hospital people to look at.
For the purpose of a doctor and a nurse. When you indicate that the Respirex was encouraged, do doctor and nurses understand?
Yes.
Do doctor and nurses understand what fair means?
Yes, ma'am.
Why was the teaching form not filled out?
The teaching form we have found is an extremely repetitive form and repeats everything that is on the pre-op and post-op checklist. In our unit, it is not used.
What would be the understanding of a doctor or a nurse if they were to see checked pre-op, post-op sheet, the deep breathing and coughing completed?
The understanding then would be that the patient had been instructed, had returned a demonstration of that instruction, and was competently able to go ahead and use the Respirex by herself.
Is that the normal hospital procedure?
Yes, ma'am.
What would be the understanding of a nurse or a physician to read fair use of Respirex?
That understanding would be that the patient was compliant in her use of it and that she was able to manually use the Respirex.
Is it ever required to write down the level?
No, ma'am, that is not a requirement.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
One question, Your Honor.
Recross, excuse me.
Fair, that could mean a range from 2 to 3 or any real number, right? It doesn't demark a specific number on the Respirex, does it?
The number of the on the respirator and the Respirex is not the important compliance. The compliance is that the patient is able to take the deep breath.
Yes, but that's not what I asked. It means, fair means a range of numbers, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Thank you, Nurse Gates. Do you have further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Carol Smith to the stand.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated.
Good morning, Mrs. Smith. We'll try and make this as painless as possible. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Carol Smith.
What is your occupation?
I'm a registered nurse.
Where do you work?
St. Joseph's Hospital,
How long have you been there?
22 years.
What is your shift?
I work the evening shift.
Could you describe briefly for me what your general duties on that shift are?
Generally, I do direct patient care. It's a surgical unit, and we do pre-op and post-op care of patients.
That would include such things as what?
As assessing of giving pain medication, ambulating them in the hall, variety of things, watching their vital signs.
Sorry. Approximately how many patients are on your shift?
30.
And you care for all 30 of those patients?
No, usually I have a patient load of 6 to 8.
Could you describe, please, the difference between your shift, the evening shift, and, say, the morning shift or the night shift? How are they different?
Well, let's see. On the evening shift, we only have one meal to serve, for one thing. Most of the people who have surgery come back pretty much on the day shift. Most of the surgery is done on the day shift. Our duties at And the evening include preparing people for bed, giving them bedtime medication, that sort of thing.
Were you working at St. Joseph's in August of 1983?
Yes.
In what capacity?
I was a registered nurse and worked the evening shift on the surgical floor.
And are records kept of all the patients that you deal with?
Yes.
By whom?
There is a chart that's kept on the floor of all patients.
So you would keep those records?
Yes, part of the records would be kept by me, yes.
In addition to anyone else, maybe?
Other people who are employed by the hospital, the attending physician would write in that record.
What sorts of records are kept on the patients?
Well, we have doctor's orders, certainly, progress notes, medication sheets, different flow sheets are used for the care that's given to patients.
I'd like to focus your attention on the progress report in particular. Could you describe for us, in your own words, please, the purpose of the progress report?
The purpose of the progress report is to report literally the progress of the patient, what kinds of things were done for the patient, to the patient, the kind of progress that the patient was making, whether it be positive or negative.
So what sorts of things would typically be included in this report?
Typically, I'd say an IV that's been ordered, is it running, is it patent? Response to pain medication, the state of the dressing on the incision, that sort of thing.
What sorts of things would not be included in this report?
Routine, usual kinds of things are included on the flow sheet. Say the patient's vital signs were stable. They probably would not be included in the progress note. They would be listed on the flow sheet then.
Do you have a personal standard that complies sufficiently with hospital standards as to what you, as an RN, include or don't include in that progress report?
Yes.
And could you explain to us what that standard is?
Well, I think certainly on my shift, I would do an assessment of that patient. I would want to include any changes that were noted from the shift before.
Are you familiar with the plaintiff, Millie Monia?
Yes, I am.
How do you know her?
She was a patient on our floor.
Did you keep records of this particular patient?
Yes, I did.
How do you know that?
I've been able to review them.
Do you know whether or not she had any postoperative complications?
She did have complications, yes.
Very, very cursorily, could you tell us what those were?
I believe she had a urinary tract infection afterwards, or had some urinary problems, also had pneumonia.
And yet she was admitted in 1983. How do you know this?
Because I can see by the record that she did.
What procedures did you perform with respect to this patient and those complications?
Well, I have to review the record here exactly. At one point early on, I know I did have her use the Resprex. That was one of the things that we used to hopefully guard against these complications from occurring.
Could you take a moment, please, and examine especially the beginning of the report, and please indicate for the jury exactly when you did this procedure?
Okay, on August 3rd at 2100, patient was using the Resprex with encouragement. She was able to raise the ball only to level 1 at that time.
Is this a typical notation for you?
Fairly typical, yes.
Could you indicate just one other time when maybe the Resprex was used during your shift?
I can't find another place, thank you.
Thank you. In fact, what was your focus of attention with this particular patient?
I believe, in reviewing the record, that she was not voiding, and that was a particular concern for the medical people.
How often should a patient use a Resprex?
The order was written to use it every hour.
Was it?
Well, what we do with young people who are alert and oriented and able to enter into the care, we will explain that to them and encourage them to do it.
What are your responsibilities as the attending nurse to make sure that the doctor's orders are filled by the patient?
Well, I need to encourage her to do it. I need to assess her level of wellness and her ability to do it.
And what is the patient's responsibility in all this?
The patient's responsibility, I would think, would be then to
Objection, Your Honor. Based on the answers starting to come out, the witness is merely guessing and has no basis and has expressed no knowledge of what the patient knew or should have known.
The objection is sustained. Counsel, could you rephrase your question?
Ms. Smith, you stated before that you know the plaintiff in particular, isn't that right?
yes.
What are her responsibilities to ensure that she follows the doctor's orders?
Objection, lack of foundation.
No, I think that generally she may testify with regard to this patient and the patient's perception of her own care.
A patient's responsible for following doctor's orders as directed to the best of their ability, and if their aim is to improve and to get better.
One last question, Mrs. Smith. What exactly is a late entry?
A late entry is something that's written down later in the shift that may have been done actually earlier in the shift.
What, if anything, makes a late entry different from any other notation?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Is there any distinction of, say, importance with respect to a notation that is made immediately following your observations and a late entry?
Well, quite often, an entry can't be made immediately because nurses are, busy doing other things, so you have to write it in after the fact. It can't be done at that very moment.
How busy, Mrs. Smith? How busy? You mentioned that you were a busy nurse.
Mhm.
How busy are you?
Very busy.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, too busy to care about Millie's respiratory problems, isn't that right?
No.
You weren't too busy. Well, you made 32 visits to her room throughout the course of the 8 days she was in the hospital, isn't that correct?
Mhm.
32 visits, and yet you only tested her on the Respirex once, isn't that correct?
There were
Yes or no,
times-
please?
Yes.
And there you wrote down level 1 because that was what you typically wrote down, correct?
Yes.
So all the other 31 visits, you didn't write anything down because you didn't do anything about the Respirex, isn't that correct?
There were other references made to her ability to turn and cough and deep breathe, other references made to her ability to ambulate, and in that ambulation process, there is patients are usually taking a deep breath while they do that.
I understand that. But you never made her use the Respirex throughout the 31 trips you were there, isn't that correct?
She was encouraged to use the Respirex.
Well, how do you know? You said that you only know what happened 7 years ago because you looked at the record, isn't that correct?
Well, there's certain...
Yes or no, please?
Yes.
And you looked at the record and you only saw one notation about the Respirex, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Speaking about notations in the record, you're familiar with the symbols VSS, yes?
Yes.
Vital signs stable? What does that mean?
It means that vital signs are within a normal range.
Within a normal range, somewhere between, could you please tell us what this normal range is?
Well, vital signs meaning temperature and blood pressure and heart rate and so which normal range do you want?
Blood pressure, for example. What would you consider the normal range for blood pressure?
Well, say 120 over 80 would be a normal reading.
That's a reading. I'm asking the range.
Say 100 over 70 to 130 over 95.
It's quite a discrepancy, wouldn't you agree?
The range may even be greater than that, depending
you.
on what's going on.
You're a nurse, not a physician, so you would not practice medicine, correct?
That's correct.
Because you know you need a license to do that.
That's correct.
And you don't have any such medical license.
That's correct.
Now, isn't it a fact that on August 3rd at 7:30, you gave Millie a shot of Demerol?
If it's in the record.
Would you like me to show you the record so you can
Yes, please.
confirm that? August 3rd, 1930. You medicated Millie with Demerol, didn't you?
Yes.
No, you didn't, because the record says all you did was medicate her. Isn't that correct?
It said medicated for pain.
But it doesn't say with what, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So you just made up your own mind what you're going to give her. Isn't that correct?
That's not correct.
Well, what is correct?
she was given what was ordered for pain.
Would it surprise you then to know that the doctor, until that point, never made any notation or any order of any painkiller whatsoever?
That would surprise me, yes.
That would surprise you. Would it help if I showed you the record, or would you just take my word for it?
Would help if I saw the record.
Showing you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit C, that is the physician's orders that were cut in relation to Millie's course of treatment. And you will note on August 3rd at 2000 hours, Millie was given Demerol, or ordered to get Demerol, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
A full 30 minutes after you medicated her for pain with some unknown drug, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
How much did you give her?
That would be on the medication flow sheet.
But it's not there.
No, it's not.
What kind of pain did she have? That wouldn't be on the medication flow sheet, would it?
No, it would not.
Well, what kind of pain did she have? Chest pains?
One would, you're right, it's not written exactly.
So you don't know what kind of
pain that she, you're right.
So you gave her an unknown medication for an unknown type of pain, and the doctor didn't order anything at all, isn't that correct?
She was given Demerol for her pain.
7 years ago. How do you possibly remember that? On August 3rd, at 10:30 at night, you did it again, isn't that correct? 22:30?
Yeah, she was given Demerol.
100 milligrams of Demerol, isn't that correct?
No, she was, at 10:30 at night, she was given 75 milligrams for incisional pain.
Now, taking you back to that doctor's order at 8 o'clock that night, he said 100 milligrams, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So you shortchanged her on her pain medication, isn't that
Objection, Your
correct?
Honor.
Sustained.
Well, isn't it a fact you gave her less pain medication than the doctor ordered?
That's correct.
The entire 8 days Millie was in the hospital, you didn't have a day off, did you?
That's correct.
You worked 8 days straight, from 4 p.m. till midnight.
That's correct.
Didn't have a day off before she got there either, did you?
I can't say. I do know that my name is here for every day that she was in the hospital.
I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Smith, turning your attention to the progress report once again, please. You mentioned treatment for respiratory problems being ambulation, coughing and deep breathing, Respirex. Is that right?
Yes, that's primarily what we do to, as a preventative measure, hopefully, from people getting respiratory complications.
Okay, if you follow with me, please. On page 2, while you were on the shift, the evening shift, 1930 hours, 83. Could you read for us, please, the notation there with respect to respirations?
Respiration shallow and remain shallow even after encouragement.
So you noted her respiratory problems, isn't that right?
Yes.
Could you read the following notation, please? With respect to respiration.
Using Respirex with encouragement, able to raise only to level 1.
Turning your attention to, again, page 4, when you were back on duty, the very top of the page, 1900 hours, 8483. Could you read that notation, please? With respect to the respirations.
Okay, resting with eyes closed, respirations 20 and even easy.
So in fact, you were keeping track of
Yes.
the patient's respiration problems. Isn't that right?
Yes.
On page 5, at the bottom of the page, 2045, 8583. Again, could you read that? With respect to ambulation.
Ambulated with to assist to bathroom without success in voiding, ambulating around floor and back to bathroom, again without voiding, back to bed.
Was the patient following doctor's orders with respect to ambulation
Yes, she was.
under your supervision?
Yes.
On the next page, 2235, 8583.
Resting with eyes closed, respirations 24 even.
And the following line, please. 2400 hours, 85983.
86.
With respect to coughing and deep breathing. 86. Yes.
Okay. Encouraged to cough and deep breathe.
I believe that gets the point across. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Sidebar
Sustained.
commentary by counsel.
One question.
That should be merged.
Nurse Smith, all those wonderful times, all those times you went in there and practiced this deep breathing and coughing, you didn't ask her to use the respirators, did you?
I'm sure I encouraged her to use the rest.
No, you didn't, because it's not in the record. Isn't that correct?
Objection argumentative.
He's allowed to ask his question.
It was important to her rehabilitation that she use the respirators, correct? The doctor ordered it,
That's correct.
but you didn't make her use it. Correct?
I encouraged her. I'm sure I encouraged her because we do with all patients, but it is correct that it's only written once.
I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You are excused. Thank you for your testimony.
Your Honor, defense has one final witness.
Call your witness, please.
We call Sally O'Brien to the stand.
Nurse O'Brien, raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning, Ms. O'Brien. Good morning. Could you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Sally O'Brien.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a registered nurse.
Where are you employed?
I'm presently employed at St. Joseph's Hospital.
Could you speak up, please?
St. Joseph's Hospital in Pennsylvania.
How long have you been there?
Right now, 8 years.
What shift do you work?
I work 11 to 7.
And what are the general duties on that particular shift for you?
I'm primarily a caregiver, and depending on the number of staff, I could have anywhere from 8 patients to as much as 10 to 12 patients.
How would you distinguish your particular shift, that being the night shift, from, say, the evening and the morning shifts?
Okay. Well, there is a big difference amongst all the differences of how care is given in a sense. Daytime, they give baths, etc., and they do their tests. Evenings, they kind of settle them down, and they have visitors. Nights, we make sure the patient has a comfortable night's sleep, alleviate any pain, give any treatments that are necessary, and basically follow doctor's orders.
Were you working at St. Joseph's in August of 1983?
Yes, I was.
In what capacity?
I was a registered nurse at that time.
You keep records for all of your patients?
Yes, in the chart.
What do those include, please?
It will include the doctor's order sheets, pre- and post-op teaching documentation, progress notes, discharge planning, etc.
Thank you. In your own words, could you describe to us what the purpose of the progress report is?
Progress notes basically a documentation showing what the patient is in for, the progress of how he's coming along with treatment, and basically any complications that may occur.
What is typically included in this?
How often a patient may need medication, how well a patient is responding to treatment. It alerts, from shift to shift, it alerts the medical staff and the people taking care of the patients exactly how the patient is doing.
And what would not be included in this report?
Well, if you have forms, like medication forms, you may not always document the medication given in your progress note. You would look at your medics. If you have an unusual elevation of a temperature, you may put that in your progress note, but it's not necessary to put it there as long as it's documented on the appropriate form.
Thank you. Do you have a personal standard that you follow that's consistent with hospital policy as to what you do put in and don't put in?
I object to what her personal standard may be. The hospital standard is the only thing that's relevant in this case.
May I be heard, Your Honor? The hospital standard, Your Honor, is a range of understanding. Had the procedure not been followed, that would be one thing. However, we're asking her to explain to us what she as an individual does consistent with those policies.
If that's the question, I will allow the question. Do you understand the question?
I believe so.
You may go ahead and answer.
Personally, when I went into nursing school, a lot of my own personal standards were formed by what was necessary to be included in the documentation. So therefore, when I went to work here, the standards of the hospital most often usually are the same as what you're taught. You need to know this. So I usually document what is necessary in the chart. And it's not only personal, it's standard of the hospital and my training.
Are you familiar with the plaintiff, Millie Monia?
Yes.
How were you familiar with her?
It was recently brought to my attention of the suit, and I was allowed to review the chart.
You did keep records on her then, is that right?
Yes, I did. I was her night nurse.
Do you recall whether she had any complications?
Yes, I do. Definitely. I know she had a urinary retention problem, which I was taking care of her at the time. I know she had some chest pain, and the doctor felt it was due to her esophagitis that she was getting Mylanta for. And I knew that at the end of her 6 days, unfortunately, she had an acquired nosocomial infection of pneumonia.
You mentioned the urinary retention problem. Did you deal with that?
Yes, I did.
How did you deal with that?
When at times when the patient would awake in a night of difficulty in trying to urinate, we had a straight catheterization order, and I straight catheter for her urine.
And yet the patient was here 7 years ago. How do you know this?
Because of the charting. I can go back and look at my charting.
Did you have any dealings at all with the Respirex?
Yes, I did.
To what extent?
When the pre- and post-op teaching is being done, we are encouraged to have the patient use the Respirex. In this case, the patient had a Respirex order while awake, so when there was ever an opportunity, when she was awake, if I should go in and medicate her, I would encourage her to deep breathe and use the Respirex.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination?
Yeah, briefly, Your Honor.
May I approach for a moment?
Yes.
I'd like you to take a look at the progress report.
Can you turn to page 2, please? Look at your entry on what I've marked as line 22. The entry reads, in part, uses Respirex, good post-op night.
Yes.
Can you tell me, from looking at that record, how well she used it?
No, I can't.
Now, in the accepted abbreviations for your hospital that you use, write down things. Does good post-op night appear in there?
Good post-op night?
In the accepted abbreviations.
Post-op, yes.
Good
night can
post-op
also be-
night.
Yes. It can be documented as such.
But does,
Standard practice, do you say that?
does it appear in the accepted, that phrase, good post-op night, does that appear in the accepted standard abbreviations?
To be perfectly honest with you, sir, good night is not abbreviated. Post-op is, and it is accepted in our hospital.
Your Honor, I object.
I'm
Counsel
done
is
with-
making reference to abbreviations that have not been admitted. We will stipulate to the admission of that document at this time if it would help.
I'll withdraw those questions. You entered the room in the course of these 8 days 26 times. And the doctor's orders, and your understanding of those doctor's orders, were to every time you came in and she was awake, encourage the Respirex, correct?
Yes.
Yet in those 26 times, that record shows that you only put down in the record the mention of the Respirex twice. Correct?
If that's what is documented here, then I have to say it correct.
I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Does the defense rest?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time we rest. And we reinstate our motion for a summary judgment at this time.
Same response, Your Honor.
Direct verdict.
I'm going to deny both motions. This case will go to the jury.
May it please the court, Judge Day, Mosier, Nidell, members of the jury. We've heard today an old story, a story we've heard hundreds and hundreds of times before, and it was told to us by Ms. Nidell in her opening statement. She said, blame the victim. It's the victim's fault. The same story we hear every time a rapist grabs a woman, drags her into an alley, beats her up and rapes her. It's her fault. It's Millie's fault. That's what they want you to believe. But members of the jury, you also heard the evidence. That's not what happened here. What happened here was whether or not the hospital, its doctor, its nurses, maintained the level of responsibility, the level of care that they promised to provide for Millie when she was the weakest and when she was at her most dependent on them. Did they let her down? Or didn't they? That's the question that you have to answer. Now, none of us in this room is a medical expert. None of us have any medical training. We're common folk. We're here to decide not whether or not anybody committed malpractice, but whether or not they acted reasonably whether the doctors and the nurses treated Millie the way you would want to be treated. Now, before I say any more, I feel that an apology is due here. At times, myself and my colleague, Mr. Twill, may have appeared a little abrasive. It's important that you remember who we were talking to, who was on this witness stand. The defendant doctor and the hospital, the defendant, represented by its nurses. Now, how many of you think, and using your common sense, think that these people would have sat there, raised their hand, and under oath said, I promise to tell the truth, it's my fault, I messed up? They wouldn't. And that's why I had to be a little rough, and Mr. Twill had to be a little rough, and we had to pull this truth out of them. We had to force them to give it to us, and they did. Every one of them told you the truth. But members of the jury, it wasn't easy. And sometimes it felt to me like I was trying to thread the needle of a sewing machine with a motor running. They did not want to cooperate because they felt like maybe they might have had something to hide. You heard the evidence, members of the jury. Millie went into the hospital to have her gallbladder removed. Major surgery. She was under anesthesia. She had a scar. She had a lot of pain. She was doped up on Demerol. The doctors know of the danger of what's called a nosocomial infection, a hospital-generated infection. They were aware of the dangers of this, and they planned it out preoperatively. They gave her, or they alleged to have given her, an education sheet where they taught her how to cough. They told her she would have to deep breathe. They claim that they told her how to use the Respirex, but nobody wrote it down, and we don't know that. They were aware of the danger. They told Millie about the danger. She trusted them to take care of her. And while she's suffering in pain from the incision, while she's having problems going to the bathroom, while she's suffering from all these other problems, they want you to believe that Millie was supposed to grab the Respirex every hour. They believe that Millie was supposed to be conscious and aware of the effects of the hospital environment, effects of the surgery. We've seen much testimony about whether or not these nurses and the doctor was reasonable. We've heard testimony from the doctor that she gave prescriptions. She gave orders to the nurses to administer drugs. 5,000 units of heparin, never delivered. Benadryl for sleep, never given. We've had testimony from nurses. Gave Demerol without a prescription. Gave less Demerol than was ordered. Did they want Millie to suffer? They certainly didn't follow through with their promised treatment. They taught her, members of the jury, that the trust that Millie placed in this hospital, they taught her a very important lesson, that trust at St. Joseph's Community Hospital is a four-letter word. That trust is pain. 4 extra days in the hospital suffering from pneumonia, a week and a half on her back at home, all thanks to the lack of care. And they said, oh, we did it. It just wasn't important to write it down. But did they? Nurse Carol Smith, on the witness stand, 32 trips to Millie's room, 32 times, and only asked her to use the Respirex once. Granted, they may be a little busy to take a pen and put it to paper every hour. Maybe they're too busy to go in every hour. But 32 times and only once? Is that reasonable? Is that proper? Is that the kind of care you want them to provide for you? Nurse Gates, 24 visits to the room. 4 times she asked her to use the Respirex. Nurse Gates only recorded once. The day after surgery, Millie made it to level 1. After that, we don't know. And more important than us not knowing was Dr. Chesborough didn't know. And how was Dr. Chesborough supposed to diagnose and know that Millie was not getting better? It was here, they had it, and they didn't give it to the doctor. And speaking of the Respirex, members of the jury, this is what we lawyers like to call the smoking gun. This is a Respirex. This is the device that probably made the difference here. This is the device that had Millie been properly trained and had been properly monitored, maybe she wouldn't have gotten pneumonia. Or at least if she started to develop the symptomology of pneumonia, perhaps Dr. Chesborough could have caught it sooner. And perhaps Dr. Chesborough could have treated her for her pain and suffering instead of allowing her to languish for 8 days in it. They had this, members of the jury. They had the chance. They had the opportunity. They were ordered to do it, and they didn't do it. It just didn't happen. Now you know the whole story. That's all there is to this case. Were they reasonable, or could they have done what they should have done? Doctors give the orders. Nurses should follow the orders. Neither one followed through. Now, members of the jury, we heard a lot of excuses in addition to it being Millie's fault. One of the excuses we heard that hey, it's not important. All we need to do is write down that she used it or that it was encouraged. But Millie told you the only thing she was encouraged to do was to blow into it and not suck on it, because that's what would have made her better. The hospital would like you to believe, well, she was instructed. But where's the proof? Nobody bothered to write it down if it did happen. Witnesses are 7 years old. And like a good wine, they'd like you to believe that the memories have aged with time. But they haven't, because each one of them told you that they relied on the record. And the record says, we didn't encourage the Respirex. We didn't treat her. We just wrote down generalities. We went in when we could. We didn't follow the doctor's orders. We gave the medications that we wanted to. And more important, members of the jury, these doctor and these nurses left out and forgot the single most important weapon that they could have used in a battle to protect Millie, to protect her from getting ill, to protect her in her rehabilitation. They did not do the simple thing of putting a pen to paper. If they had put a pen to paper, it would prove the old adage that the pen is mightier than the sword, because in the battle for her health, nobody bothered to do it. They threw this most important weapon away. A weapon that was important in the doctor and her diagnosis. Yeah, sure, vital signs are stable. But how do you know stable? Stable is a wide range. The doctor could not know if her vital signs got better or if they got worse. Does fare on the Respirex, members of the jury, somewhere up in here, the nurse told you. How was the doctor to know if she got better or if she got worse? They didn't take the 2 seconds to put the pen to paper. Save Millie's health. And now, members of the jury, when I'm finished, Miss Mosier will get up here and have her closing arguments, and the judge will give you your instructions. And after that, you will go into the jury room. You will take the body of facts that you've heard here today. You will wheel that body into the jury room with you. You will cut open that body like a surgeon, and you will look at the facts. And you will see that they threw away the most important weapon in Millie's health, and then you now have the opportunity to take yourselves a pen in hand, put it to paper, and find the defendants guilty of not providing the reasonable care that Millie trusted them to provide, the reasonable care that they promised to provide, the reasonable care that they did not provide.
Counsel for the defendant.
May it please the court. Counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Mr. Blum has made an eloquent speech. He's made analogies to wine, to a rape case, and to a smoking gun. This case is much more simpler than any analogy he made here today. This case comes down to one word, a word that you've been taught since you were a child, and a word that we have spent our entire lives learning to uphold: responsibility. We ourselves as counsel have a responsibility. Our responsibility was to present to you the truth, the facts and the evidence of what occurred from August 2nd to August 10th, 1983 in St. Joseph's Memorial Hospital. Your responsibility as jurors is to listen to the evidence, weigh it very carefully, and establish the credibility of each witness. The hospital's responsibility is to carefully record, reasonably and responsibly, what occurs to each patient, to record the medicine, to record the progress, to record the orders, and to take the best health care possible for each patient. However, there is one other person's responsibility, and that is for each of us as a patient. Each patient, when they enter that hospital door, does not become a child. They remain an adult. Mrs. Monio was a responsible adult when she walked in the hospital doors. Then she forgot about it. You do go to a hospital for care, concern, and for someone else to take care of the needs that you have not been trained to take care of. But you have been trained to follow orders. You have been told when you are asked to do something, you do it. When you're told by your dentist to brush your teeth, each adult is responsible for brushing their teeth. Any tooth decay caused by that is your responsibility for not having brushed your teeth as the dentist told you. You're responsible for the medication when you go home after a doctor prescribes it for you. If you don't take it, that is your responsibility. And Mrs. Monia failed in her responsibility. She was told, encouraged, and taught how to use a Respirex. She was also told, encouraged, and taught how to deep breathe, cough, and ambulate. 3 nurses and a doctor all helped with all of those functions to help control the respiratory problems. Common occurrences after major surgery. She was ambulated. She was showed how to deep breathe and cough. She was showed the Respirex twice, preoperatively and postoperatively when she was awake and no longer under the effects of the anesthesia. Mrs. Money has you believe that she was never taught this. She also would ask you to believe that at no time when a nurse was in the room and encouraging her was she using the Respirex. Well, that tells you 2 things. 1, she didn't use the Respirex, as she was asked to do. And 2, that she probably was not telling the truth. For as according to the progress records that you may take with you into the evidence room, it is documented and noted. And in fact, one nurse actually wrote down the level that she raised it to. She didn't make it up. She saw Mrs. Monia use the Respirex correctly. And in fact, in order to raise the ball, you absolutely have to use this correctly. To blow into it will not raise it. To breathe in will raise it. If it was raised to level 1, Miss Monia knew how to use it, used it, and then stopped using it. She told you, it hurt. Gallbladder surgery, ladies and gentlemen, is extremely painful. Extremely. And to deep breathe after surgery of that type is painful. But that's not the point, ladies and gentlemen. The point is it may be painful, but it is to your help to use the Respirex, to deep breathe and cough, to ambulate. Mrs. Monia told you she chose not to do this. In fact, she cared so little about it, she let her 7-year-old child play with it. This, that she claims was the key to her getting pneumonia, she let her child play with. She even told you she didn't think it was important. When she was awake and semi-non-groggy anymore, she didn't think to ask whether or not she was using it right. She didn't think she was using it right. It's her responsibility to ask, how do I use this? I want to take care of my health. How do I do it? She never asked those questions. That was Mrs. Monia's responsibility. That which she did not do. The hospital's responsibility. They do have some here today. And their responsibility is logged in items such as the progress report, the pre- and post-op medical records, the doctor's orders. You heard testimony from 3 nurses and a doctor. They told you, each of them, what they need to see in a progress report for their purposes as doctors and nurses. This is the case, ladies and gentlemen. Doctors and nurses are the people who use these reports. They are the ones who must understand what the notations mean. We as laypersons do not need to have the same understanding. We do not need to know what fair means on this in terms of numbers. If every nurse and every doctor goes into a room, reads using Respirex, encouraged, does fair, and they know what progress has been made, that is the point. That is all that is reasonable and necessary and responsible. And each and every single doctor and nurse that testified told you that they know what that means. They do not need number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. They don't need it. Now, we may need it, but that's not the point. These records are prepared and kept and used for doctors and nurses. The patient doesn't need to know, that's a personal thing. We don't need to know. They need to know. All 4 of them told you they knew. Medication. They seem to find it important that it was not in one report, it's in another report. Medication is put in the medical report, in the medication report. It does not need to be cumulative. It does not need to be written twice. If we were to ask each nurse and each doctor to write in every single piece of paper, every single time they do something, that is all they will be doing. And I don't think any of you here today are asking that a nurse or a doctor be held to that responsibility. Because then it is to our detriment. It is our health care that is reduced because we are asking them to put on 7 copies of papers that they gave 50 levels of Demerol. It's in one place. Post-op, pre-op, Respirex, deep breathing, and coughing were taught, and you will take that with you. It was checked. It may not have been initialized, but I believe that all hospital personnel, and including ourselves as laypersons, will realize that a check is equivalent of a signature. It was done. Every single person who would look at that record would know what was done. It is not needed to write the progress report because all any personnel has to do, according to hospital procedures, is to go back and look at the pre-op, post-op record. They will know who did it, what time they did it, and how it was done. We are not asking to instill in you hospital procedures. You do not need that knowledge. You need the knowledge of what was done. Was it sufficient for a hospital, doctor, or nurse? 4 of them told you it was. The only person who told you it wasn't was plaintiff's counsel. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the doctors and the nurses and the entire staff at St. Joseph's Memorial Hospital acted reasonably and responsible in keeping their records. They documented, they made notations, and they observed. Each of them can tell you the same thing about the level of progress of the patient. And what they told you was that Mrs. Monia chose not to be effective in her own health care. Mrs. Monia did not use Respirex. It hurt. She did not ambulate as much because it hurt. She did not deep breathe and cough because it hurt. And she claims because she blew into it all the time and did it wrong, she didn't think it was working. She should have asked. It's a very simple procedure. I ask each of you to use it. 1 second, that ball moves up, you know you've done it right. And you'll do it right every time after that. Ms. Monia is an adult, responsible, intelligent. Hold her to that. I am sure that when you weigh all the facts and the evidence of this case, you will take with you the evidence that has been presented, the testimony that's been presented, and the credibility of the witnesses that you've chosen. You will return the only verdict that is consistent with fairness. The only verdict that is consistent with the facts, evidence, and testimony that has been presented here today. The only evidence, the only verdict that is consistent with justice. The only verdict consistent with each of our own responsibilities.